If you're anything like me, you just picked up a racing game or driving sim and realized that playing it with one of these, well, doesn't quite feel as nice as it could, right?
Farther on the inside.
So, what do? Well, you head to Amazon and you look up racing wheel, and you'll be presented with a wide variety of choices ranging from very cheap to very expensive. With a little research, I came to the conclusion that the very cheap wheels really weren't much of an option. So with a little bit more digging, I found the Hori Apex racing wheel. Comes in at about $99, which is actually on the quite cheap side when it comes to a racing sim wheel. And it has your typical controller button scheme on it with a PlayStation branding style. And it has a 270-degree rotation. So not quite one full rotation in either direction. It is self-centering with a spring, which ultimately feels relatively nice. It's not the most realistic, but it could be worse. Of course, it has your standard paddle shifters, which a lot of people complain that they feel quite cheap and flimsy. Yeah, I would say that, yeah, they do feel cheap and flimsy, but for $99, it's not that bad. There's a solid click when it engages, and ultimately, it didn't seem to be much of an issue. Now, mounting-wise, it comes with a desk clamp, which just is fixed to the body of the wheel by a long screw with a little lever on it. Seems to work fine, but if you had a desk with the the metal bar just under the lip of the desk, you might have trouble getting it to firmly affixed to the desk. However, if your desk is nice and flat, should hold on there really well even when you're cranking down on it. Now, that's just the basics of the wheel. It also has the typical two-pedal scheme, the gas and a brake, no clutch. So that right there is probably enough to make somebody who's very serious about driving simulation, want to look for something better. Unfortunately, this is about as good as it's going to get for the $99 point, unless you were going to try to possibly buy an upgrade, pedal set for the Hori, which I would say at that point, you probably just want to consider buying a better wheel in general. The pedals feel pretty flimsy. They get the job done. There is this grip-like texture that just comes flat on the bottom of them. However, when I got this, I just threw it right on the ground and started playing with it, and was finding that it just slid right across the ground very quickly. It was effectively terrible. It seemed completely useless. Then I realized that I was just being a big dummy, because it flips out. And with it flipped out, your foot rests on here, which really holds it down a lot better. And it's not, it's not perfect. It's something you'll have to be conscious of, not to totally push it around, but it gets the job done for the most part. Ideally, if you could wedge it against something or fix it to something, that would be a lot better. It connects to the wheel with your standard phone jack type adapter, which is quite common. Now, the wheel itself and the pedals make for a much better racing experience than a controller. Absolutely, hands down. Now, let's talk about the setup process. It was mostly plug and play. However, the wheel comes with these two switches on the top of it. As you'll see, there's PS4-N, PS4-S, and PS3. Basically, the only one that matters is the one in the middle, PS4-S. Now, the wheel comes preset on the PS4-N, which means essentially PS4 normal, or it effectively is going to try to emulate a PS4 controller. You will want to flick that switch to the middle setting, like so, into the PS4-S setting, which is the PS4 steering setting. If you don't do that, you will find that the controls are very unresponsive, and you'll have to make these wide swooping turns to even move the car just a little bit. So make sure first thing you do out of the box, set it on that PS4-S setting, and then you can pretty much just forget about it. Now, the other switch that says DP, LS, or RS, that controls how the directional pad operates. So when it's on DP, it emulates the directional pad of your controller. When it's on LS, it emulates the left stick of the controller. And when it's on RS, well, it emulates the right stick of the controller, which I found was really nice for just being able to flick it back and forth and, make sort of little adjustments as you are playing. There is another setting that you will very likely want to adjust, which is the steering wheel dead zone. Now, I found that in games like Assetto Corsa and Project Cars, the dead zone was quite large and would lead towards a sort of snapping feeling where when you turn out of the dead zone, the wheel in the game suddenly jerks to the side, in game, leading to these sort of very unrefined movements. So you will definitely want to reduce the dead zone, which fortunately is an option. Now, some games will have a dead zone type control in their settings, which you can also play with. However, this wheel itself does allow you to adjust the dead zone right on the wheel. So I'm gonna swap to the other camera and show you how to do that. Now, in order to adjust the dead zone, you'll start by holding down the assign button until the right hand light turns on. Now that's on, you'll hit option. This now puts you in the dead zone adjustment mode. To adjust the dead zone itself, you either select the down arrow or the up arrow on the directional pad. Now, somewhat counterintuitively, the up arrow is actually the adjustment to make the dead zone more narrow, and the down button is actually the adjustment to make the dead zone wider. So what I would recommend doing is just selecting the directional button up until you get this bluish greenish color. Just press it up basically until the light stops changing. Now you have the most narrow dead zone possible, which still left a bit of leeway. Once you've gone and done that, or at least set it where you wanted it, go ahead and just hit assign, and now your steering wheel has been adjusted. If you want further adjustments to the dead zone, you can try manipulating that in the game of your choice, and its efficacy may vary. So you've got your wheel, you've set it to PS4S, you've adjusted the dead zone, you're pretty much ready to rock and roll. Now the question is, how does it handle? While that is going to be subjective to each person, in my experience, it was definitely better than using the gamepad with the analog sticks. However, I would say it still feels a bit more like a game controller than an actual steering wheel. Maybe that's a given, but if you're coming into this looking for a wheel that's going to be as close to real life or really just feel like a real steering wheel, this probably isn't going to do it for you. But if you're just looking for something to provide you a little bit more accuracy, a little bit more immersion, and just a fun way of, playing NASCAR Heat or Assetto Corsa or whatever you're playing, this is definitely a great entry wheel. As far as my experiences with it, I plugged it in, I played with it for probably about 6 or 7 hours, maybe a little bit more over the course of about a week or so. And I found that on the first day, the wheel felt very awkward and felt a little unintuitive at some points. But I found that after about 2 hours or so, I had gotten used to the way the wheel felt, and I found myself, sitting there with a big stupid grin on my face, just having fun. And by virtue of that, I would endorse this wheel. In fact, if you aren't trying to get into sim racing at a very serious level, you just want a wheel that is, easy to use, relatively cheap, this would be perfect to just sort of have in the closet to pull out when you just want to goof around in some sort of racing game and just have a good time. This is a great option. It's not going to totally break the bank, but it's also not going to provide you the level of, realism that a steering wheel with force feedback will offer. So I've thrown in some footage of me racing around with this guy. However, don't take the sloppy lines to be the wheel's fault. I'm just not very good at racing games. I just like hopping in and having some fun with them. And at no point did I feel like the wheel itself was absolutely the reason why I wasn't doing well. However, I do think that if I was to put in quite a bit of hours on this wheel, I would likely feel like I was outgrowing it, and you would start to notice the weaknesses of the wheel. So this is where the discussion goes towards force feedback. Obviously, this wheel does not offer force feedback. However, it does offer your standard sort of rumble pack vibrations. So just like the vibrations that an Xbox or PlayStation controller would have, which is a nice touch. However, it doesn't provide you the tactile information, as where with a force feedback steering wheel, you can sort of feel the emulated road under the wheel, if you will. You can feel when the steering wheel starts to lighten up that you're losing traction, all of those sort of things, which this steering wheel does not have any of that. The wheel itself will only be vibrating if you like run off the track or something that is visually obvious, as where force feedback can provide you information that isn't visually obvious, like losing traction as you're coming into a turn or something along those lines that you can only feel at certain points. By nature of that, if you are trying to get into like competitive racing, I would say skip the $90, $99 Hori wheel and save up for something like the Logitech or a Thrustmaster or one of those entry-level force feedback wheels. Is this a good wheel? I would say so. I actually don't have any real complaints about this wheel for what it is. This would make a great Christmas present for a kid or just somebody who might not be super serious about sim racing but has some racing games at home that they like to goof around in. This is perfect for that. In those cases, I would actually recommend this wheel to somebody over something with force feedback like a Logitech, because the force feedback in and of itself actually has its own learning curve, adds a whole sort of another layer of complexity to racing sim, which if you're getting into it for the sim aspect, the simulation aspect of the racing games, then you're definitely going to want the force feedback over something like this. But if you just want something that you can have fun with, you can feel a little bit more in control than on a controller potentially, absolutely a solid choice is the Hori Apex Racing Wheel. Funny little note about it, the wheel has this PlayStation branding on it. However, I found that in some games, including Project Cars 2, the wheel is recognized as a Microsoft controller, which is a little interesting. So it basically defaulted in the game to as if you were playing it with a Xbox controller, which could be a good thing or a bad thing in some cases. Regarding the overall quality of the wheel, it is a sort of just standard rubber, sort of artificial leather feeling, but it actually doesn't feel too bad in the hands. It's got a nice grip to it. The wheel itself feels, smooth, and I would say it feels about the quality of your standard sort of third-party controller. It doesn't feel super cheap, with the exception of the shifters, which do feel a bit flimsy, but everything else about the wheel feels right in line with its $99 price tag. So overall, my rating of the wheel would be that it's a solid choice for the average gamer who's not particularly concerned about simulation driving and who just wants to have a steering wheel controller around for fun and not much more than that. So again, if you're just looking for a gift for somebody or just, something to goof around with from time to time, consider picking up a Hori Apex Racing Wheel. I will have an affiliate link in the description. If you purchase it through that, it does support the channel and it would be greatly appreciated. Please drop a comment and let me know what game you plan on playing with your wheel, or if you plan on getting a different wheel entirely. So if you enjoyed this or found the video helpful at all, please consider dropping a like and subscribing. Thank you for joining. I appreciate you. Until next time.